And so then when people started getting sick, the last place they were going to go is mainstream medicine, right? For answers. And I think the first time I heard of someone in our little town getting sick, it was a young woman, still young. She wasn't even 50 yet. And she was a vegetarian activist, very
Wow.
famous vegetarian activist and bicycle activist in San Francisco. And she died quite rapidly of cancer. And we had a huge, beautiful memorial for her. And I remember everybody thinking, well, how could she get cancer? She was such a good
Wow.
vegetarian, right? She was so healthy. She rode bicycles. She was fit. She was beautiful. Didn't make any sense. And so, the idea that veganism and vegetarianism was the healthiest path, right? So ingrained in us that when someone who's a vegetarian gets sick, we would assume it was some sort of toxin in the environment.
Yeah. Has to be something different. It's not the diet, clearly.
Couldn't be the
Yeah.
diet.
Couldn't be.
Couldn't be the diet. And then another and another and another and another friend after friend after friend
That's
got
crazy.
cancer. And many were in their 50s. One had stomach cancer in his 40s. One had stomach cancer in his 50s. The next one was a woman who was in her 50s, who came back from a juice cleansing retreat at the Hippocrates Institute, where she was doing lots and lots of wheatgrass, and she had jaundice and liver problems. She started vomiting blood, and then she rapidly, very rapidly died of liver cancer. And everybody said, well, gosh, imagine how sick she would have been if she wasn't doing all that wheatgrass.
That's remarkable. That's crazy. Wow. So
Right?
sad.
Nobody could put it together and say maybe the wheatgrass was what made her sick.
Yep. Yep. That's right. You told me some crazy things offline about your community, and I do want to come back to that because I think it's absolutely fascinating and absolutely tragic. Before we do, again, like looking back hindsight, before you got to what we would say is rock bottom, where you had to consider, eating animal foods, which must have been very, very difficult. What
It
things
was.
specific? I'm sure it was awful. What things specifically were you dealing with health wise? Like, what were some of the things that you noticed?
But, well, when I first, the earliest stages of the vegan health problems come in stages. You have the problems that you get. I was about 40 when I went vegan. And so the first problems I started having were cold fingers. I was cold all the time, freezing cold, shivering in bright sunlight. I lost my menstrual period. I went completely flat chested. I went from normally a C or D cup to like an A cup, literally like flat as a board. I lost so much weight that I could fit only in size 0. And then I had to shop in the girls' department. So, you get to this point where is this veganism or is this an eating disorder? There,
Yeah.
there are, I did see more and more people who were uh, extreme emaciation. Um, I had that was sort of the stage one. Then I started seeing some different health practitioners and doctors, and they said, "Well, you need to eat omega-3 fatty acids. You need to eat eggs. You need to eat butter." And I'm like, oh, "Butter, eggs? No way! I'm not eating that." And the problem is when you haven't been eating those things for a long time, you can't digest them.
That's right.
Lost the ability to digest them. So I would feel really sick, very, very ill when I tried to eat those things. And I was trying to gain weight. I was just forcing anything. And I found the only thing that really would put any weight on was to eat bags of potato chips,
Wow.
which now we know about seed oils. Couldn't have eaten anything worse.
Right.
But at least I was getting the calories and I was able to put some weight on and warming up my body. So it took a while before I was able to introduce eggs back into my diet. And that happened when I lived on a rural property and we were raising our own chickens.
Wow.
So I was very unhealthy at that point. And that was around 2012. I had just gotten back from this music festival where I was doing in Mexico for the end of the Mayan calendar, where I did all the PR and brought uh, 70 members of the international press to talk about the end of the world. And everything was, of course, vegetarian and vegan. And I got really, 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 really sick. And that was probably what I thought was my first rock bottom. Really, really ill in a foreign country and unable to I was just stuck in a tent basically for a month, vomiting and diarrhea, and it might have been dengue fever or something. I don't
A
know.
month. A
A month.
month.
A month
Wow.
like that. Well, I had friends coming in, checking on me and paying my bill there and bringing me juice or water, and finally managed to just to get to a doctor about some antibiotics, and managed to get home, fly home. And that was when I started eating the eggs and taking a lot of supplements. But the eggs, we were so, this is another thing that happens to you when you go super vegan. Nobody wants to hire you anymore, and you're so spaced out that you start getting broke, right? So I went
Wow.
from being this six-figure computer executive to struggling. And, my boyfriend and I are growing our own chickens for eggs and growing our own kale and juicing our own wheatgrass. And we're feeding the chickens bread that we're getting, stale bread. So the eggs were making us sick because they were eating gluten. The chickens were
Wow.
eating. I now have the knowledge that when you feed an animal grains or soy or uh, canola, the eggs have omega-6 fatty acids rather than the omega-3, which is what we want. We want the animal to be eating bugs,
Yeah.
foraging, right? Eating their natural, more carnivorous diet and only having grain as a supplement if they need a little extra calories. So, of course, the eggs didn't help me that much.
Yeah.
And in 2014, I was getting sick all the time. I just had nonstop colds, asthma. I was hypersensitive to mold. I was just sick, and I started getting really bad cystic acne. You see this a lot in the vegan recovery videos. You go on YouTube and you go on Instagram. The vegans have this cystic, horrible red blotches all over their faces, and it's like cysts that you can't, there's no fluid in them, you can't just pop them, they're like cysts. I was also getting boils. I had anemia, very severe anemia, pernicious anemia, and I was trying to treat the anemia by taking iron tonics, vegetarian iron tonic rather than an animal-based solution. I, uh, this went on, and then by 2017, the problems became more mental. So my brain wasn't functioning.
Yeah.
Uh, I started to feel some pain in my joints. I did occasionally eat a little bit of meat. I would eat meat on my menstrual period once a month, sometimes, because the bleeding was so bad.
Wow.
And I'm just gonna be really frank with you. This is another thing that can happen with the vegan diet because you have anemia. The anemia creates a vicious cycle where you become low in vitamin B12, which causes the anemia. The anemia causes the bleeding. You're low in vitamin K, so you don't clot, and the bleeding gets worse and worse and worse. And what I didn't see going on in my body behind the scenes was large fibroid tumors that had formed inside my pelvic cavity. Um, you and I now know about oxalate. Of course, I knew nothing about oxalate at that time. And since the beginning of my veganism, the primary source of nutrition for me was green smoothies and
Yeah.
green soups using the
Yeah.
Ann Wigmore Hippocrates Institute method of giant blender loads of greens. And I thought I was really doing it right. I mean, I grew my own greens. I harvested wild dandelions. I used organic avocados. I put, organic lemons in there. I mean, let me just put my power on here. My power is, there we go. It's starting to go low.
You're good.
So so I was really, really overdoing the oxalate.
Yeah. You
Didn't
think
know
about
about
that,
oxalate then.
right? You think about that smoothie, and knowing what you know now, that smoothie is a horror show. Horror show. Terrible. I did the same thing. Tons of spinach,
Oh, you
all
did
the
it too?
beets. Oh yeah, absolutely. Every morning, and with the almond milk and the beets and the spinach, handfuls of spinach, and you're in the blender makes it even worse. It's like mechanically chopping everything up and making everything more absorbable by your body. Like people think they're doing themselves a favor. That is straight up toxic poison.
Thank you for saying that, because when I tell my friends that, they think I'm nuts.
Yeah. No,
And
people will
I would
suffer.
put it all in my Vitamix, which I paid over $500 for. And I traveled with a blender. I wouldn't go anywhere without a smoothie or a blender or I thought it was so healthy.
Wow, I did too. I forgot about that until you said that. I did too.
I was just religious about it. And then, the juices, and then spending a fortune, $9 juices and $12 smoothies, and hanging out in these really beautiful vegetarian restaurants all the time, and eating these really expensive quinoa bowls, right? The big quinoa bowl
Oh
with
yeah.
with kale on top
Yep.
of it, and almonds, and then
Yep.
maybe a nice chai on the side with almond milk in it, and a
Horrible.
nice
Horrible.
nut pie for dessert.
Uh, yeah.
Ah,
Terrible.
top it all
Terrible.
off with a green juice,
Uh,
all of that was just building up in my joints. So now we get to, you think every time you hit rock bottom, you think you've gone as low as you possibly can go in your life. And what you don't realize is there's another level that's lower.